A warm welcome. This is still Thank You for Breaking Up With Me with my promise to you fulfilled. Today we are going to be taking a deeper dive into some of our conversations by addressing most of the questions that you asked throughout the series, our learning series on Thank You for Breaking Up With Me. And of course, as promised, I've brought back some familiar faces, the guests that we had throughout the different lessons, so they are not strangers to you. We have the lovely Mtale, and look out for Wow Woman, having some really great and meaningful conversations, and I know that you have a Facebook platform. Look her up and jump into to those life-changing conversations. We have Dario from the Ulendo Leadership Academy, and I'm aware that there is some great leadership material that's coming out, and just be deliberate about equipping yourself and walking in leadership. Of course, Tendai and Fungisai Maronga, Mr. and Mrs. M from Margaret James Creations, doing some really great things in making great use of social media platforms to speak relevant messages. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Great. So today my job is easy. I'm just going to be asking the questions and they get to answer them. But before we get into these questions and answers, I want to do a quick check-in with each and every one of you, and kind of like just talk about what do you want to share after our initial conversations. What are you learning? What's coming to light for you? What are you starting to realize that you'd like to bring onto this platform? Thank you for breaking up with me. Ladies first.
Wow. Okay, I think for me, one of the things that were more emphasized after our conversation was just the will for people to want their lives changed, but just perhaps that lacking that step or that bravery, that boldness to launch out and make the hard decisions, which when you really think about it, they're very easy decisions, like don't pick up the phone when he's calling, you know what I mean? Or when he's outside, don't go outside. You know, like little things of such nature, they understand within themselves they're capable, but just that hesitation. And so it's just about encouraging and also just giving them that little help or that little push to say you can take ownership of your journey of your life. You can make the changes that you want to see. Yeah. So I think
Tele says it's those things that we believe are hard that are not so hard. But I think it's really because the world has told us that it is hard to move on. Yeah. So great.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things that I have after all the different lessons that you have shared is the importance for people to know that they have authority. Like she's saying, it's not a hard decision. You just have to have the willpower to make it happen. So it's important for people to understand that they have authority over their lives. They have authority over their emotions and how they feel about certain things. That it is a choice not to heal. And it is a choice to heal. So I think that's one of the most important things that I feel needs to be said out loud a lot more. That every situation you're in, it's because of the decision you make. It's a choice you make. So if you want to get out of something, you need to make another choice. What matters is the choice that you make.
Right. There you have it. You have the authority to heal, to pick up and to move on. Gentlemen?
I think for me, it's just taking comfort in knowing that there is a lot more to lose staying in that state, and a lot more to gain by actually moving forward. With the past lessons and equally just looking upon stages in my life, I realized that I enjoyed pain, and yet the easiest decision was just to start working on the healing process, which worked out a lot easier than staying in the pain ultimately.
Right. Okay, so it's about wanting that more abundant life that Jesus Christ came for.
I think, obviously, also from the interaction of just different people, I came to see that one of the critical things, maybe why a lot of people don't necessarily talk about what they're dealing with, problems and the issues, is a perceived lack of safe spaces.
Right.
Yeah. And I think if somebody, because we all love to protect ourselves,
Yes.
Yeah.
but when we are aware of the fact that I'm safe and that this person that maybe I even want to talk to is more interested in my healing than anything else, I think we were able to unpack a lot in that
Yes.
sense. And even just guys, we can have those kinds of conversations in areas in which we're hating and things like that. But as long as I think we know that we're still going to be respectable people at the end of the day, that whatever comes out does not diminish who we are.
So some of the things that are left unattended is really because there are no safe spaces or we perceive
that.
danger
Yeah.
around us. Great. So there you have it. Our lovely guests have shared their reflections. Do you have anything that you have started to become conscious of? Why don't you go into our comment box below and drop your personal reflections and learnings. In case you're joining us today for the first time, I want to encourage you to just go right back to lesson number 1, where we were talking about breakups and the pain behind them. We wanted to show you that where the pain comes from and what are the different things that add to that pain. Why don't you go ahead and check that out. In our second discussion, we went on to talking about the intensive care of breakup. Sometimes understanding that we have to check ourselves in for some intensive care, but also to be strategic about our healing, to have a plan to come out of the pain. Our third lesson was on bagging your manure, and we wanted to look at how do you move on, what are the things that you need to learn that become valuable to your wholeness and to your life after the breakup, because we did say that you are more than your breakup, more than what you've been through. Last week we brought you a bonus lesson where we spoke about relationships that don't work. We went into also looking at the things that make relationships not work as well. So take some time to check all of those lessons out. Today we want to answer your questions to make the learning experience valuable. We want to make sure that we are addressing the questions that you have brought onto this platform. Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
More than ready. We were engaging just before the cameras went on, and I said, you guys are just get ready for some great reflections, and we'll see what questions we can answer today. If your question is not answered, remember we still have a few other guests that are going to answer the remaining questions. So we'll begin first of all with a question that was asked a number of times about how to make their relationships break up proof.
Wow.
How do they make sure that the relationship that they are in never breaks up? Is that possible? How do you do it?
I think I would maybe recommend that should not be your goal and your focus.
Yeah.
Don't put energy into I should make this breakup free. I think consider your responsibilities in the relationship and focus on what you can bring to the table to make it better. You're not in control of the other person's decisions and feelings, but I think you can play your part. So identify your part, what's your part in it? And if you can take care of your part, other things hopefully will go your way. If they don't, you will deal with that season at a different place. But I think just don't be preoccupied with I want to make sure that this does not, we don't end up in a breakup. Just do your part, do the right thing. Yeah.
I think also by virtue of focusing too much, as you said, on trying to make it breakup proof, you can become toxic.
Yeah.
Which is what you're trying to avoid.
So you can cause the breakup by trying not to break up.
Yeah, so like Darius said, really it's about having a set of values of what you are bringing to the relationship and making sure that you pursue that. And that should give you the breakup proof you're looking for.
So it does mean that sometimes we can tick all the boxes and relationship still breaks up.
Most
Yeah.
definitely.
Is that a hard
because-
pill to swallow maybe?
It
It's
is.
a reality.
It's
a
a
reality.
reality. Yeah, because I mean, like you said, that shouldn't be your focus. Your focus should be the part that you play in the relationship.
Right.
You don't have control over the other person and their feelings.
Right.
And you also have to bear in mind that if you're gonna make it breakup proof, whatever that means, you both have to be in agreement.
Yeah.
The both of you. So
What's
as
the agreement?
the agreement should be, we want this relationship to keep going.
Right. Okay,
Right?
absolutely.
We want,
Gotcha.
that's the agreement you should have.
Yeah.
Because I can want the relationship to keep going, but what if he doesn't? Isn't that an element of selfishness on my part? That I want this relationship to work, so because I want it, it should work. And he should want it too, but he could be what I'm looking for, but maybe I'm not what he's looking for.
Oh.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
That's true. That is true. And even just when you look at it, I mean, like Funky said, both of you must have the willpower
Yeah.
to make it work.
Yeah.
It's like a marriage, and that's why for me, I love the concept of marriage because both of you are in it for the long term till
Yes.
death do us part.
Right.
And so you need to establish what's, where is this relationship going? Where do we want it to go? And if both of you establish that's how far you want to go, that's a good place to start. But as you go along that journey, if this person doesn't feel like, you're what he's looking for, or
Yeah.
maybe the other, the reverse
Yeah.
can happen. Our willpower, and he loves us enough. Sometimes we don't even choose him, but he loves us enough to let us go, even though he knows that he is the best thing that ever happens to us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's good for us to just not even think about it that way. Like, yeah.
Okay. Good.
And I think you probably would need to have a whole lot of control
Yeah.
for you to create such an animal of breakup proof, because
Yeah.
you need to be moving all the
Oh my
pieces
gosh.
really.
And
Yeah.
it's exhausting.
And I think, like he said,
Yeah.
yes, it's exhausting, but also it's toxic.
It's
Yeah.
It's like witchcraft, really. Sorry,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, but okay, when I look at it from your perspective, it's like you want to control this person to do as I say.
I mean, that's
They do as I
There are
imagine.
places you can get to, as I say.
Exactly. I was about to say
that's not the
that.
kind of party we have here.
No, and that's the whole
It's not
reason
the
why
kind of
people end up
solution.
looking
No.
for that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because they want control. They
Yeah.
want total control. They want
Yeah.
it to be breakup proof. This is why we have love potions out there
Yeah.
for certain
People want a quick fix.
Exactly.
They want control. But listen, I think we really do hear your heart
Yeah.
if you ask this question, that you really perhaps at a place where you're saying this is a really great thing and how do I make it work? And what we really want to say to you is that do the work. But don't operate in fear, because I think what's coming out is that fear now begins to manifest the toxicity that we're trying to avoid, and leading you into all sorts of manipulation that is very available in this world that we're living in. We're going to move to the next question. Okay, so this question says, how do I deal with a breakup where, okay, so I'm going to just try and paraphrase this a bit, but keeping true to the question, because some of the questions are quite similar. So a number of people are asking the similar questions or who have the same burden. So let's ask it this way. This person says that, how do I deal with a breakup where I'm blaming God for leading me into a relationship? So a number of people say they prayed, they fasted, and they clearly heard God say, this is the one. You got it right, it's the one. But then afterwards they break up. What happens in that situation? They're blaming God, they prayed, they fasted, they clearly heard God, and relationship breaks up.
Well, I'll give an example of a couple of years ago when Mr. Maranga and I decided to go our separate ways. I remember I was so angry at God, and I said, you know what, I got married. I thought you said that marriage is the till death do you part thing. What's happening now? What is this? What am I dealing with? And I was so fearful because I felt like he lied to me.
God lied to you.
Yes, I felt like God lied to me and that he gave me a raw deal, and now my marriage was falling apart. But really, I think it's important for for anyone in any situation to be at a place where they completely trust God no matter what's happening now. So then at the time it looked like we were breaking up, but we got back together, and we've been together for a long time now, and we even had 2 kids after that supposed breakup. So I think people need to get to a place where they trust God, because even in that moment where it felt like we were over for good, I remember clearly that I had reached a point where I was like, you know what, God, if this works, I'm glad. If it doesn't, I know you have me. And I think people need to trust God enough to know that He's in control and He's got your back. I think fear, whenever you don't know that God is in control, or you don't believe that He has your back, you tend to blame Him for your situation. So you need to be at a place where you trust God, where you trust that no matter what it looks like now, He's got you covered.
I also think one of the things I learned during that period and years after was you still have to do the work. Sometimes people just think, now God has answered the prayer, that's it ends here. You know, but there's still work that starts from the man is there or the woman is there. We now start a new chapter of work, you know. So the work maybe was trying to get the partner. Then now we need to build something together. Build the relationship together. So a lot of people stop there, and then because you didn't do the work, you will get a raw deal. Ultimately, you know, the principles of hard work and the results of hard work are similar. If you don't put in work, you will not get the kind of results you're looking for. So feeling shortchanged, sometimes we need to go and check ourselves to see where could I have probably dropped the ball, you know, and then take it from there. And you know, most certain times God will show you that, look, my child, you could have just done this, and this relationship may have actually given you the result you're looking for.
So if He could show you that this is the one, He can show you where you dropped the ball and how to get things going.
Yeah.
But what about in a situation, for example, where you know this person is, according to you, you prayed, you fasted, you did all these things, but the person is just not willing and doesn't want to be a part of that. You know, it's difficult, because then you're like, but I know God said this is the person, you know, but it's not working. This person doesn't want to work it with me. And I think that's where the concept for me of moving on is, because if that person is outside the will of God, for me, I believe sometimes we limit what God can do within certain confines. You know, even when there was the first covenant, the Old Testament, the first covenant, there was something that God had to do. He brought Jesus to establish something different. So I think that sometimes we tend to limit God in this box of, it's just the one, this is the one, you know, and then sometimes I think that is very interesting, because when I was analyzing the story of Jacob, Leah and Rachel, he wanted Leah. He wanted Rachel, but he was given Leah, you know? And then I was wondering, I'm like, but what was that? He was obviously praying, fasting, and felt Rachel is the one. You know, faithfully served for 7 years, Rachel is the one. But there comes Leah. An interesting thing is Leah comes with a promise. She's carrying Judah. So I feel like sometimes we need to take off the limits of God. And I feel like the concept of the one, I don't know who, I didn't see it in the Bible, I don't know who came up with this concept, but it's really, really destroying women and men also, in terms of them moving on to the new thing that God, you know, has in store for them. So I feel like when there's disobedience, maybe the guy is disobedient to God's will for them to be together. You want, what will happen to you? Will you wait until one day? What if he doesn't? What if he goes and he just, you know, establishes
comes back? So it goes back to trusting God, that no matter the situation, you have to trust that God has your back.
And I think particularly when you've prayed and fasted, I think you've fulfilled all righteousness. You've done everything you're required to do. And I think that's a good resting place. Is there the one? Let's talk about the one. Who is the one?
I think the one might not, in my view, the one is not a specific person,
Yeah.
but I think it's specific qualities
Yeah.
in that person. So my the one is food. Maybe if it was in another life, it would be someone just like Fungi, just not Fungi side. So it's just the qualities of that God has put in her are the ones that are going to help me fulfill purpose. So sometimes I think we want to tag it or narrow it down to
an
the 1 billion
individual.
plus people to an individual to say, no, if it's not this person, then
I'll never love again.
I'll never love again. And yet I don't think that was particularly God's plan.
Yeah, I mean, I think also saying the one limits people who've lost their loved ones, because then that means that the one is dead. Now there's no one for you, but that's not true. People remarry after they've lost a loved one.
Don't come to you just now, and I think, don't you think that also the insight that Fungi shares is one of the things that get people to not be satisfied moving forward when they feel like, oh, I lost the greatest love I ever had, I'll never love again, and they start to devalue the promise that God gives to them, and yet many times it's just based on a perception and a cap that we've put on God.
Yeah. I think obviously some of the things he mentioned were I think there's a responsibility that you have as a person when God tells you, okay, this is the direction, this is the way, walk in it. You still do have a responsibility. But also I think one of the things, because you see it's a very huge thing when you say that you had God tell you that this is the person. So perhaps you should, if it has not worked out, I think it's also your responsibility to go back to God, because he's the one that told you that you are very convinced that he's the one that told you that this is the person. So I think that conversation you should have with the one that told you that, because I think it will be much easier for you maybe to process that situation. Because if you tell me that, okay, God said this, you've put me in a very difficult position to tell you anything
Else.
other than that. I mean, who am I? You understand? So, but I think in the dynamics, obviously, of relationships is what's your responsibility in it. God is quite interesting. You notice that he wants the Israelites to move from Egypt to the promised land, and he wants that. He's declared it. But that generation dies. It doesn't mean that God did not want that. So just because God wants something for you does not mean that it will automatically happen. There's a responsibility you have as well. And so I think it's quite interesting when you deal with some of these things.
That's so true.
Maybe just to say a few words on the one, like I said, I have a big problem with whoever came up with this.
If you know who that person is, please
I
drop their name. We want to talk to them.
Yeah, because they really box you, And then for me, I believe that a relationship can work with anybody.
Yes,
This is what I
true.
believe. So long as you have the willpower, both of you have the willpower to make it work. Like you've seen people so dynamic, you could not even put them together, but they've just made it work. So it's about the willpower in both the individuals to make it work. That's what I think would create the one. Like the one thing they have in common is they want to make it work. So for me, that's what I think. So, but if it's just you who wants it to work, the other person doesn't want, and then you're saying they are the one.
So the one is the one you choose.
Yes,
The one you choose.
the one you choose, the one that you
choose.
the one you choose, and the one that chooses you.
Exactly.
And I was thinking about this maybe just quickly. It's something that I'm still exploring, because it fascinated me when God created Adam and Eve. Literally, okay, maybe Adam first. He gave the responsibility of naming, different things to Adam. It's amazing that whatever the man called that thing, that was its name. God did not argue with Adam. He did not say, no, call them mosquito and elephant. So there was a level of authority and of right decision making, because he was walking with God. So I think when we're in a place where I think our relationship is right with God, we have the capacity to make decisions that God says, that's good. He does not even maybe object.
Yeah.
It's anyway, it's a working theory.
Great theory. Great perspective on this table today. We are going to move on. What I love about your responses is that it gives us many different perspectives, right? Because for the people asking this question, it could be any one of these things that we've spoken about. It might be just breaking everything up and just starting to learn about what it really means to hear from God. And when God says, this is the person for what exactly? What is the assignment that they're called to serve? But really, let's trust God's heart for us, that He loves us. So if you have had a bad experience with a promise that you feel God made to you, just get to know God's heart for you. He's a loving Father. He loves you. He says in His word that if us as human beings desire good gifts for our children, what more will He do for us? So God loves you, and He truly has good plans for you. Next question. How do you get past the pain of what a person would have done to you if you've been in a painful, abusive relationship?
I like that question.
Yeah.
And I actually remember Mtale answering that something similar. Okay, maybe she gave an answer that I think can speak to this.
Right.
And I believed in that as well for the longest time. There's a scripture that talks about, pray for your enemies.
Yes.
Most of the times I think our perception is that when we pray for our enemies, we want them to change. But what I discovered is that when you do that, it changes you.
Yes.
It actually changes you.
Yeah.
And I think that's where that's where the power of praying for those that
Are we
hurt
having
you.
the same drink? Because your insights are so deep today. Dario's going to some deep places today. Carry on.
No, but really, I discovered that because I've made practice of it
Right. Okay.
in the past. So it's something that I realized that it was not necessarily changing those people, but it was changing me.
your heart.
It was changing my heart and the way I felt
Right.
about the situation and about the people.
Yes.
Because I could now empathize and
Yes.
sympathize and say, you know what, these are also people. They make mistakes. God loves them as much as He loves me. Jesus died for them. So I think that's very, very significant. It's not the easiest of things, but I think as you go on, you actually realize that it changes.
I also agree with Dario on that. I realize that forgiveness really, aside just forgiving that person, coming back to forgive yourself for finding yourself, in that situation. And then, like the previous person said, God told them, and so forgiving God now because you are convinced that God, gave you that person who is now hurting you. So and not because God needs your forgiveness, but because you need it.
You need to.
So that you can heal
Yeah.
and so that you can move forward. So a lot of the time, pain sticks with us because the hardest people to forgive, in my view, you've never been the person who committed the crime. It's always yourself and usually also God. For us believers, you find to say, no, I fasted, I did everything right, and this person, but we have no control. As my wife mentioned in the last episode, where she said, feelings at the end of the day, it's a choice. So if that person at that moment decided to make the choice of giving up on the relationship, then it shouldn't, as much as it will hurt you, it should not then be your burden that it's their decision to give up on that. So like I always say, relationships are work, and so not all of us are going to have the willpower to carry the work, the whole 9 years.
And this person speaks about also like if there's been some abuse. And I think it's also realizing that hurt people. And it speaks into God's instruction for us to love our enemies. And I think when you start to look at a person who hurts you as a hurting person, it totally shifts your perspective and makes you actually feel some compassion for them. And of course, the separation from someone who is abusive is very, very important for both your well-being, so that you both get help along the way. All right, I'm going to move on. We have so many questions and so many answers at this table. Somebody says, what happens if the person who cheated on you is the clergy? Does the clergy
The man of God.
cheat?
The man
How
of
do
God.
I
Anointed
handle
man of God.
the anointing cheat? Does the anointing cheat, guys? How do we deal with that?
My maybe because I've been in church so long, I only dated anointed men.
Hallelujah.
So I think that for me, I've come to accept this truth.
Yeah.
Okay, two things actually. The first for me is anointing shouldn't be a substitute for great character.
Yeah.
And most oftentimes we think that just because he's anointed, then he
Yeah.
has character.
Yeah.
You know, the Bible says that there are people who have a form of godliness, but they deny
The
the power thereof,
That's
which is I think 2 Timothy 3 verse 4.
Mm-hmm.
And I've come to just realize that even the person that's having this form of godliness, who's not allowed God to transform them, renew their minds, and shift the way they do things, like their behavior, it's possible for that to be a reality. And it's possible for you to attach yourself to someone who you're like, on the pulpit, he's like dropping these anointed stuff, but then when you're relating things, something else, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think it's important for us to do that. And then also another thing that helped me a lot is accept, you call him man of God or woman of God. You need to first remember that there's a man, there's a human being
Yeah.
who is subject to some of the situations, misjudgments,
Exactly.
that, everyday people
Anointed or not.
you know what I mean? So you need to treat them like as such, like, oh, there's the man, and then you should also remember that they're of God, and that's why you also need to be very wise in the way you deal with these people when they hurt you, because there's that component as well. So I think I've seen people literally sleep with men of God and all that just because they're like, oh, he's an anointed man of God, meaning when he wants this thing, all of a sudden it starts to look right because it's the man of God that is asking, not knowing that he is also subject to making wrong decisions, like we see David do. He was tempted, he made wrong decisions, he committed even murder. So it's important for us to be wise and to treat, we need to sometimes separate the anointing for a minute, deal with the person for what they really are and for what they're doing, and treat it as.
It's funny, I always use that same example of David. Like, can you imagine if David lived in our time now? This was a man who the Bible says, a man after God's own heart. And when you try to look at the course of his life, some of those things nowadays would never be, tolerated easily. And he'd fall in the bracket of, some of these questionable men of God. But at the end of the day, like Mutale said, it's not about, it's about remembering that he is still man as much as there is God in him. He has still got those factors he has to deal with as a man.
I think it takes a lot of maturity for the person that's in a situation where they're dealing with a person of authority like that. And part of that maturity is, that first of all, yes, the expectation is high because to whom much is given, much is required. So it's just normal that you expect more from a man of God. And when we look at disappointment itself, it's literally expectation versus reality and what you experience. So because you placed that person at a very high place, your disappointment is much more, even though they are a man, like you've said. So there's just that expectation that I think, that's why it takes a lot of maturity, I think, for you to, because you have to process all those things and say, you know what, I still respect, if anyway they're respectable, I still respect the fact that this is a man of God, but I do understand their failings, that they are people as well. So how do you process and deal with that as well?
I don't know, because there's this one thing I think that we also need to be conscious about. I noticed that most people that date a clergy want to stay in the same place. If this person has hurt you, how do you get built in that spiritual environment where this person has cheated or abused or whatever, I think it's important for you to be completely healed and for you to get the spiritual nourishment that you need in order for you to grow in the things of God, to separate yourself from that spiritual environment.
Love it.
You know,
Yeah.
because that's something that I've noticed where people are hurting in church because they're sitting and listening to this man of God or worshiping as this worshiper leads you in the presence of God, and you're just like, oh my goodness.
Talking about the faithfulness. How dare you say faithfulness?
And you know, how do you grow? How do you receive God with such barriers of unforgiveness and all that? You know, it just keeps, like you said, like you keep opening up the wounds and stuff. So separate yourself from that spiritual environment, and then be wise, like Dario's emphasized. There's a tendency of when a man of God does something wrong, because you want to really, you're angry, you start to want to tarnish that person's name at the expense of your healing, because you broken people, like hurt people. So you need to separate yourself, get healed. Don't even talk about what he did, unless it's really like, let's say for instance it's gross abuse which affected you, or you know, that's different.
But still even talk to the right people.
Talk to the right people. Don't go on social media, I'm exposing this man of God, or your friends, you know what I mean? I think like I mentioned, you need to be conscious that he's a man, but he's also a man of God. And not that we're defending them, but I think it's more important for you to get your healing than your immediate justice, because what's happening on the inside is more important, I think.
I think it's important to also know that it shouldn't make a difference whether he's clergy or not. You should treat him the same way. You know, I think if we are placing some kind of power of some sort, for lack of a better term, on the fact that he's clergy, then we're excusing other men, which is not the point. What we should do is treat them the same. They are human beings, they are flesh and blood, they will err. And also the importance of separating the person from the mistake, and understanding that cheating is not a problem, it's a symptom of another problem. So it's important for you, like Dario said, maturity. You need some level of maturity to deal with certain issues. And I feel like clergy or not, the same recipe works. Same recipe, guys. Clergy or not. So whether he's a man of God or he doesn't go to church, the same way you are going to deal with this person is the same way you have to deal with the other person. So I think it's important for people to know that separate the man from the mistake, and also acknowledge that they are human beings.
But for me, I would like to say something, because I encountered a situation with someone where now power dynamics, and I think that's why I think you said something about authority. You see, but some people, for me, they're not the same, and you can't sometimes really just deal with them the same way. If I went around saying this person cheated on me, and they're a person of power or political. I've seen people who've gone out prematurely, let's say, or talk about the situation, but because of the power that the person carries, it backfires on them, and they start becoming victims of ridicule. Like, you're the one who must have gone to the, like, you know, like, just imagine your bishop or your pastor, and how people sometimes just would never think of him in a certain way. But let's say someone finds themselves in a position where they are like cheated or abused or whatever. So I feel like sometimes you have to also, like you said, be mature, but distinguish. There's some people that when you go up against them, it's not the same way that when you're like trying to, how you deal with them is not the same way that you deal with someone with a lower profile. And the backlash sometimes, it's because I heard someone go through stuff and I felt sorry with how it kind of, you know, backfired on her. So I was like, it's unfortunate. But it's sometimes we have to accept it and see how we can work around it.
And I mean, really, like, is the answer really talking about it or getting people to agree that he was wrong and you were right? So I think, you know, like, you want to think about, like,
why are you talking about it?
Like what?
I think like what you mentioned, that beyond your justice, It's
The
about,
aspect
you
of
know,
healing.
healing.
Yeah.
So the fact that, you know, ultimately God's going to deal with that person. Yeah, so, you know,
In His way as well.
His way as
Yeah.
well. Yeah, which might not necessarily.
He might deal
what you
with
feel.
this person with so much tenderness and
Yeah.
loving kindness.
Listen, so it's not going to fall in your preferred
Yeah, and then you're like, so touched.
kind of way.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think that's
So-
when you get angry with God,
Yeah.
right? And you want it fire to fall on your ex.
Pat on the back, you know, and
Yeah.
I got it
Yeah.
raw, but I think like what you said, focusing on your healing, because that's actually probably more important than you
Yeah.
getting your justice.
Yeah.
Justice will be served by the person who serves
Who
justice.
serves justice.
Yeah.
Listen, guys, sometimes it's really about you doing your work and letting the person who you've walked away with take responsibility over their own work. Don't get too wound up on like, what have they learned? Have they paid the price? Because there's so much that happens behind the scenes. Do your work, and I hope that you find your healing, but also to just get to a place where you can have your relationship with God restored, so that you don't feel like, God, the man who represented you let me down, so I'm not interested. And I think that will be important. Somebody says that I have been cheated on so many times, and I've resorted to stalking and looking for potential cheating, you know, relationships in my husband. So how do I deal with that? So I've been let down so many times, really trying to paraphrase these questions. I've been let down so many times. So the only thing that now works for her is to stalk and to go digging for what her husband could possibly be up to, so that she's not disappointed again. I don't know.
I was about to look at you.
I don't know why I was doing that, right? I'm just going with the flow. Like,
So the weight of this office, yeah, there's a certain way you have to surrender.
Okay,
go for it for you.
I seem to be the person of authority.
oh my gosh. Okay, first of all, let me just say that it's possible to have peace even when your relationship looks like there's a lot of chaos going on. It's possible for you to be preserved in a chaotic situation. And the only way that happens is when we surrender the relationship to God. Like Dario said earlier on, we have no control over these other people. We only have control over ourselves. We have control over how we react to situations. We have control over how we allow something to make us feel. And in areas of infidelity, I know a lot of people think, oh no, we don't want to hear this, but you are going to have to hear this. The honest truth is there is really nothing you can do. If you have aired your concern that this is uncomfortable, I do not want you doing this anymore, the rest is up to God and that relationship that that person has with God. I believe that the more you try, the more you do in these situations always makes things worse. So we are always tempted to do more. The minute you find out that your man or your woman is cheating, you are so tempted to say more and do more. But it's a trap that the enemy leads you into some kind of bondage, because that is bondage.
Right.
Now you cannot operate in peace because you're thinking, that's the kind of, okay, so Tendai likes light-skinned girls. So if Mutale is in the room, I have to keep an eye on her. What kind of bondage is that?
Yeah.
That robs you of happiness
Yeah.
and peace. And when I realized that, I was sleeping. And there were no more 3 a.m. wake-up calls. they
Just
stopped.
Darren looked about 3 and wake up. He's the single man on the table. Like, what happened at 3 a.m.?
I'm thinking at 3 a.m. I'm thinking something.
Something else, right?
But like 3 a.m. is when you get woken up to. So who was that person?
The jury calls at 3 a.m.
The jury calls at
That's
3
when your
a.m.
verdict gets cast. You're not even open to
Wow.
defense.
That means like from midnight when you were sleeping up until 3, there were like investigations.
Yes.
There were proceedings going on, you know,
While you were sleeping.
while you're sleeping.
Yes.
So I think it's so important for you to surrender your situation to God.
Right.
You have the option of deciding whether you still want in or not.
Yeah.
If you
But
want,
then, like this, so this person, this lady says that she's been cheated on so many times before. So in her current relationship, she's having to do more investigative work to make sure that she has the upper hand and she's not caught off guard like before. So her partner may not even be cheating.
That's the
And then she goes on to say that is there a problem with then stalking my partner?
Yeah, there definitely is, because that is bondage. I promise you, the Holy Spirit is not whispering in your ear, okay, check that message, check it now when he's sleeping. That's not the Holy Spirit.
So you're not
That is
even
the enemy.
sleeping when you should be sleeping.
Yeah, you're not even sleeping. And what does the Word of God say about sleep? He gives sleep to those he loves.
And you know, sometimes
Yeah.
you can overreact
So-
to something that's actually innocent because you are digging.
Yeah.
You will find
Exactly.
something.
I actually know of a person who went through her husband's phone in the middle of the night, and he woke up while she was doing it, and he said, you know what you're looking for, you're gonna find it, and I don't want to hear a thing from you. How do you respond to that? How do you respond to that? You know, stalking your husband and checking for, oh, I want to have the upper hand, it robs you of your authority as his wife. It robs you of your authority of what then do you do?
Because you
when
made yourself a victim.
you've made yourself a victim.
this is-
you're
you
already
Make
defeated.
a bullet relationship proof, the first question.
Right.
Because you're now trying to
Breakup
control.
proof,
'cause
yeah.
She's already gone into this new relationship with, okay, so once bitten,
Yeah,
twice shy.
shy.
So I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna put this brother in check from
What
the start.
what does she say in the end? She says, because I don't want to be caught off guard.
Yeah.
Like that feels like you're robbing yourself of the moment, of the joy that is happening right now, because you are worried about something that hasn't even happened.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the enemy stealing precious time from you. That is the enemy robbing you of joy and love and happiness that you could be enjoying now. And I think also just going back to understanding that you as an individual can have peace even if things don't seem okay.
Right. And I mean, we must also understand that the devil does also support his agenda.
Most
So
definitely.
if he can actually create a whole scenario for you, which is not real. And I think one of the dangers there is that once you profile your spouse as a cheat when they are not, they fall into that role eventually. And that's why we're called, the Bible tells us that there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus, because being condemned redefines you as
Funny you say that.
guilty.
Mom, that actually someone close to us was once mentioned something like that, where they're like, in my previous relationship, I got accused of seeing one of his employees, and he says, he couldn't even fathom like having a relationship with that person, but now because she kept on making such a big fuss about it, he started to see her differently,
So she is
That
pretty.
actually, like you're saying, profiling is also, it's dangerous. You profile that way, and then you start putting a seed in. You become toxic. You start planting that seed you are trying so hard to pluck out.
And I think maybe like it's also for me, I would like to understand what your relationship's like. Okay, for example, for me, my husband has access to my phone. I have access to his phone. Sometimes we use each other's phones. But it's just interesting that like, because I know like it's there, whenever I feel like, so the whole concept of now going in to check, because he's left all communication lines open, meaning he also knows that whatever it is I'm privy to, but just out of that, like you were saying, what are you looking for? So I think it's also about that, and I think that couples should also, I personally would recommend that couples should just leave their phones, but not that it's because you're going to go check, but you find most times, I think people who like doing that are like when there's a password, you want to go in and you find the password, then you get his finger, he's hiding stuff. Oh my God. People say
Face recognition.
Because you know that there's something he's hiding, and you already know there's something he's hiding, so you're trying to dig in. But when you know that, we don't even, like, I've never had such conversations. Like, so what's that? Because I don't know, maybe because we know that.
I do think that the problem that this person has is a problem of trust.
Yes,
And that is what needs to be fixed.
Yes.
Because if that is not fixed, she will continue. So you can understand her insecurities because they're based on their past experiences. That means both of them have a responsibility. If it's the man, his responsibility is to create that environment where she can grow in confidence and in trust in him. It might take a while. So the example you've given, the example you've given where you have this open access, there's a level of confidence that you have because of those actions. And I think if she can find a space that is similar, as they constantly engage, fight back and forth, but it's an issue of trust, and that's what needs to be resolved.
Well, would you believe we are out of time and we need to take I know, but we need to, I want to group some of our questions around that have come up quite a lot, and these are people who are married but are still dealing with an ex. Okay, so because there's a lot of these questions, so maybe it's your wife that still has the ex, checking up on them. How are you doing? How are the children? You know, and one particular one where one woman says that my husband and his ex, despite the fact that they've been married for some time, her husband's ex, they still like the husband gives his ex a lot of business advice, personal advice, like what's going on there, what do they need to know, how do we fix this, is there anything to fix?
You probably but just don't give. Is it that don't give the devil a foot?
Yeah. A foothold.
A foothold, you know. Yeah. So that's what I can say, but the experts will.
The experts.
Oh my God.
People with life behind such things.
I think I'll go first, and I'll just say that I think it's important to. When you guys are married, you guys got married first of all because you trust each other.
Right.
I think it's important to also be honest and open about your relationships outside of your marriage, like your friendships and stuff like that. I remember very early on in my marriage, I was insecure, and I was not comfortable with any relationship. It didn't matter whether they had a history, they kissed before, or they liked each other but nothing ever happened. I was just insecure of any other woman who had access to him, you know. And I think it's important sometimes to address that. When I look back on it, I do see that I was insecure, and sometimes they make a big deal out of absolutely nothing. And I think I apart from that insecurity, there was also the aspect of him being patient with me and him allowing me to get accustomed to these other relationships as well. So I think you owe each other that much when you give each other space to grow, and you facilitate that growth as couples. So as much as right now all his lady friends that he's had in his life, they're still there, you know, and I have no problem with them now. Because I dealt with those insecurities. We dealt with them as a couple. So I think it's important, like I said, as couples, you need to facilitate each other's growth. You need to make room for each other. You need to make room for each other to grow. So as much as I needed to make room for understanding the dynamics of his friendships, he needed to make room for me to get accustomed to those friendships. So it's both their responsibility as husband and wife. One of the things that we refuse is to keep secrets. So if there's a friend, a lady friend of his that I don't like, I will let it be known. And he will always make an effort to make it to a point that for me to always know that there is nothing to worry about in this relationship. You know, if there's a person that he doesn't like who happens to be my friend and is a male, he will let me know that, you know what, I'm not very comfortable about this relationship, you know. And also owing to the fact that sometimes there have been scenarios where there were women who were attracted to him and he couldn't tell. And I could, you know, but then
Women can always tell.
yes, women can always tell when there's another woman who's attracted to their husband, you know. And the issue should have never been that he would do something with that person. I should have
trying
been
to protect him.
Yes, but the issue that I'm trying to get across is the fact that yes, there are other women that are attracted to him. There's nothing I can do about that. There are going to be women attracted to him, whether I like it or not. At work, I don't go to work with him. I don't know which one is attracted to him at work, you know. But I do know my husband, and I do know that it's not possible for anything to go on. I know who he is. I know our relationship and how much we value each other. And if there was a slip up, he can come to me and talk to me about it. It's not a train smash for our marriage, and it shouldn't be, because you guys owe each other that much. You owe each other the room to grow together.
I like actually what Dario had mentioned about having to facilitate. One of the things we learned early is patience. Later on, that aside also having patience, also coming to a place where I would realize, why did that relationship not sit well with my wife? So I have to now get there and analyze. Okay, you know, she's an ex-girlfriend, or we've got some history, but we're past that. And but then why is it a problem for the person that I love so much and have started a new life with? And so in giving ourselves room to grow, it also allowed us, or allowed even myself, to outgrow those relationships.
Let them go.
Yes, where I could now realize that, you know, things aren't the same, and it's also not worth it for me to not have peace. You know? Also, if I because
You said peace, we
equally, if I value that so-called ex as well that much, it is for their best interest that I also see that relationship mature to the appropriate level, because I've now got someone else in my life.
Okay.
So I think for me, the issue of allowing your ex in the picture, and you know, as you get married, my experience is there are different exes.
Okay.
There's some exes that even I know my husband would look at it and is like, you know, I can go and have conversations, and even he's like, you know, like, but I've been very deliberate, and he's also being very deliberate. Like, we don't have our exes in, like, they're not a part of our lives. Like, we can talk when we find each other. We'll say hello. We'll check. Okay, good. Because Lusaka is very small. Unfortunately, you bump into each other, and you know, especially when you just find each other. And so it's about, there's certain types that you know that this one you can say hi to, but there are those exes that you may have been very strongly attached that you just need to cut off. Because like you said, they make your wife uncomfortable, because obviously something went on, or you know, so it's important for you to be conscious of that. And then the other thing I noticed is some people, the moment that you're still holding on to this person, you won't fully appreciate, like you're saying, you won't fully appreciate the new. Like, I like using you can't put old wine into new wine skin. You know, it will burst, you know, because new must come with new. So it's important for you to, even that issue of checking your husband's, your boyfriend's phone because of your last experience, enter into this relationship with renewed, be new, and so that you can appreciate the best of the new thing that is coming to you. And like, for me, one of the things that came to me this morning, and you've touched on it, is it's not about being perfect. It's about pursuing perfect peace. Because most times we like being comfortable saying, no, but we're not perfect. I'm not perfect. But you can make decisions where you experience perfect peace. And I feel like once you do that, even as an individual, as a couple, you know, you will experience that perfect peace.
Okay. Great. So many great perspectives, and I hope that we've been able to answer you today, and I hope that there's been some learning for you. We're going to go on answering some questions. I know we're out of time, but at least for this particular series, this is the last time that you will be seeing these wonderful guests. So I'll give them 1 minute to just leave you with something that will leave a lasting impact on your heart, and hopefully get you to a place where you can finally say, thank you for breaking up with me. All right, let's take it away, guys.
I'll close this way. Our slogan at Orlando is, the kind of future you want will not be handed to you, you must create it.
Wow.
And so for me, the weight of that is that we have to take responsibility for where we want to go.
Right.
That means then we put things in place today that will help us to have the future that we desire and that we want. So what future are you creating by the decisions you're making today? So put in the work, go through the process, create by God's grace the good thing that you want, and then depend on Him.
Awesome.
Wow. Well, I guess like I've mentioned even in the last class, that relationships are work, and you're gonna thank God for some of those that will not go the way you intended them to go. And don't beat yourself up too hard for things that are out of your control. Mistakes maybe you could have made, that other person probably made. It's not your fault, and even if it was, there is still a story after that. I've been married 13 wonderful years, and for me and my wife, it's been filled with, it's like an epic movie. Drama, we've got little bloodshed and tears and all of that stuff. And at the end of the day, we only thank God that He managed to preserve and restore us. And so equally, if He could do it for us, then He can
Put
definitely
in the work.
do it for us. Yeah. So it's really all about putting in that extra work. Yeah.
Great.
Amen. Well, I will say trust God. I think for me, this has proven to work time and time again. It doesn't matter what situation you're in, what kind of relationship you're in, as long as you trust God, you are where you are supposed to be. As long as you trust God, you are safe. He is your safety net. Don't depend on other people. When we do things for man, we always get disappointed. But when we do things, we should do it unto the Lord. At Margaret James, we believe that the only content worth creating is content that glorifies God. When you do what glorifies God, you will be in safe hands. You will be safe, and you can experience perfect peace.
Wonderful.
I'm just like, wow, everything they said.
Everything they said. Come on, tell me, do something a little more.
We know. Because like Fuki said, at the end of the day, we are created for God. And if God is not enough for us, no one else will ever be enough, and if we can't find out everything in Him, what happens is people are insufficient. When you come into a situation where someone is not enough, God says He's more than enough.
Wow.
So He's the one that you should always be content with. I think trouble comes when we start creating small gods in people. Oh, I want this person to love me. Oh, I want this person to do all these things for me. And then when they disappoint you, when you're broken, and being broken is a good place, because the only one that can fix you again is your source, is God. So you come back to where you belong, and stay there. Just stay in God and let God be enough for you. If you've never experienced Him as El Shaddai, it's because you've never really given Him the opportunity. And I think that you need to give Him the opportunity to show you just how much of everything He is, or He can be to you. So that's something. And I'll also be deliberate. The truth is, we do know what we want to see, but like Dario said, we need to make that conscious decision to do deliberate acts, and become that which God has created us to be.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. It is a wrap, as we've been addressing your questions and answers in the first set of Thank You for Breaking Up With Me question and answer lesson or episode. There's been answers and there have been lessons as well today. My name is Pastor Gladys Paswani, and do catch me and another team of great visionary leaders, God-fearing visionary leaders, as we engage in more meaningful conversation. Goodbye and God bless you. Till next time.